Hi everyone, I'm Lena Yu from World Cyber Health, and today I'll be presenting CrackedCantil, a malware symphony delivered by cracked software performed by loaders, infostealers, ransomware et al. So I'm gonna do a little self-introduction over here, which I call myself the decomposer of the symphony, because I am technically decomposing the symphony, not composing it. So I am Lena Yu, also known as Lambda Mamba, and I am the founder of World Cyber Health, as well as Malware Village. So this year for DEF CON 32, I created the Mark I competition, which stands for Malware Analysis Report Competition. So who here actually went to DEF CON this year? So did you guys have the opportunity to come over to our area? Okay, well, it's okay. Next year, definitely do come visit. So actually, so this year we had this cat-shaped badge for DEF CON. So you can actually find our malware community room. So that's something that, for the people that went to DEF CON, definitely do try looking for the room. And let me know if you guys find the room. So I also created the Malmon, which is like, I guess, like a parody of Pokemon, which is malware monsters. And before, I was actually the representative of Anyrun, and I was the author of the malware analysis blogs. So chances are you may have come across Anyrun articles. So these are the ones that I authored. So actually, before I went into malware analysis, I was a trusted execution environment and RISC-V researcher. So a lot of times people ask, oh, like those are really unrelated things. But again, by doing this kind of research, I had a lot of assembly language knowledge. So this is kind of why I entered the field of malware analysis. So before I get into the nitty-gritty research part, I want to start with how malware analysis relates to art. So first of all, one key part of malware analysis would be the usage of abstraction and creativity. So previously I mentioned Malmons, which is a parody of Pokemon. So these are some of the characterized malware, Malmons that I developed and drew. Before I created these cartoons, I was also doing a lot of hyper-realistic art, like these hyper-realistic Raven sketches. So a lot of the times when I go teach people malware analysis, I also teach them how to draw cartoons. Because what I say is actually that hyper-realistic Raven is actually easier to draw than these cartoons, because these cartoons, you have to express a really complex thing in really abstracted way while still maintaining its charm. Kind of like how I also say a good compiler translates high-level language into low-level language in the least amount of instructions possible while still maintaining its meaning. So again, this is why I say abstraction is really important, and the reason why I created the Mark I competition is to teach people how to analyze malware and communicate it and express it in a way that many people of all ages and backgrounds can understand. So another thing about malware analysis would be storytelling. So these are, again, Malmon. This is a slammer malware that I made these cartoons to explain what a slammer malware is. So just that, slamming and stuff. Yeah, that. Again, that was a way to express how this thing is 376 bytes on this little kitchen scale. So another thing, I know this is supposed to be like academic research where I'm supposed to be presenting my research, but I just want to get into why art relates to this first. So again, another thing that I like to say a lot is expressionism is also really important, because this is the WannaCry Malmon that I created. So this is another from a different perspective, and that is like an oil painting I did. So why I say expressionism is really important is because this WannaCry, it's got this tail, like the decryption key has its tail, and these chains symbolize encryption, and then someone tries to reach out to the key, but ends up failing and falling to their death. So actually, what I like to say, and when I wrote this virus bulletin paper, it was actually really similar to how I drew these artwork. Because first of all, I needed to do a lot of abstraction and creativity. The malware that this whole campaign I analyzed in this paper, it was highly complex, so I had to put in a lot of imagination to fill in the gaps and express it in a way that many people can understand. And similar to that, this is why I say storytelling is also very important, because it's got to have that logical structure, flow, organization. And finally, expressionism. Like, from the title of this talk, I titled it Malware Symphony for a reason, to express a way that malware can work together in harmony. So this is why I went through it's already like 5 minutes into the presentation, but I wanted to establish why art relates to this whole paper I wrote. So now we're actually going to get into the paper. So defining malware symphony. So before we get into I want to show you like an example of this sandbox detonation. So again, this is like really sped up, so that's okay because you can see the sandbox detonation in that QR code. So yeah. So on the side, you can see the process tree of this whole malware detonation. It's really complicated. It's like everything intertwines, intertangled, and it's just really difficult to look at it. So as you saw in that process tree, it looked pretty jumbled up. However, again, on the surface, things may look very chaotic. But upon closer inspection, these chaotic things can actually be ordered. So there are actually many cases of multiple malware infections, but, well, I mean, every malware symphony is technically a multi-malware infection because it's a symphony, and symphonies are usually, one person doesn't do that. However, not every multiple malware infection is a malware symphony, and this is why I go into length in defining what is a malware symphony and what is not in the paper. So first of all, I'm going to say what it shouldn't have, which would be conflicts. And what do I mean by conflicts? So in my paper, in table 1, these are the conflicts that I highlighted. So these can be things like ransomware encrypting files before other malware can perform. Others can be like more than one ransomware attempting to encrypt the files, like malware attempting to kill each other, malware competing for resources, and basically any kind of interferences that might be detrimental to each malware's existence on the system. So here I would finally define what a malware symphony is. So first of all, it is an infection with multiple distinct malware, where the malware detonations are carefully coordinated and they work together without conflict. And these ones can be decomposed into something I call movements, akin to how a symphony is also broken down into movements. So these would include the overture of the loaders, the ensemble of the infostealers, the chorale of the otherwares, and the finale of the ransomware. So how does one decompose a symphony? So in table 2 of the paper, I go into detail the typical composition scene in malware symphony. And these are broken into the order, the symphony movements, the description, action, and common MITRE techniques. So naming the symphony. The naming convention I proposed was symphony number, ID, the name of the malware symphony. The ID would be the unique number for the specific case of the campaign, and the name of the malware symphony would be the name of the specific campaign. So this is why I propose this, is because, I mean, even within the same campaign, there would be different variations, even if it shares an overall similar composition. So this is what it was like. I proposed this to more easily identify the specific case of the malware symphony. So what do I mean by that? So even in the CrackedCantil symphony I talk about here, these are 3 CrackedCantil symphonies that I looked at. There's 1, 2, and 3. So the one I go into detail in this paper would be number 1. So as you can see in number 2 and number 3, number 2 uses glibteba xmrig, but doesn't use Amadey like in number 1. Well, number 3 uses Kelius and doesn't use smoke like number 1 and 2. So staging the symphony, again, in order to perform a proper symphony, a solid stage is necessary. So one way that these kind of symphonies are often staged would be through cracked software. So why? Because cracked software, there are many reasons as to why it's a popular method of distribution. Because these can be used to distribute specific versions of the cracked software. For example, if someone is looking up cracked Photoshop for Windows 10, chances are they're using Windows 10. So they would embed a Windows 10 malware onto the cracked version. Again, in many places, the usage and distribution of cracked software is illegal, and victims are not legally protected and less likely to seek help, and attackers capitalize on this. So symphony number 1 is what I look at in depth. So the performers here would be the loaders, which would be PrivateLoader, SmokeLoader, infostealers, the Lumma, RedLine, RisePro, Amadey, Stealc, otherware, Socks5Systemz, coin miners, and the ransomware would be STOP. So I named it the CrackedCantil because it originates from cracked software, and Cantil is actually a viper species, which uses this bright yellow tail to lure in prey. And similar to the whole plethora of malware involved in this campaign, it uses a complex cocktail of venom in order to maximize the damage within the victim's body. Also, the process tree is just really like, it looks like a snake pit. So yeah, so in order to find the venue would be like kind of like the stage. So I looked up cracked IDA Pro. So if I really wanted that cracked IDA Pro, and then I actually visited the Google groups, you can actually see that there's actually a download link, which leads to it's hosted on that place. And then if you download it, it gives you a password-protected archive, which the password is 1234. So when you once you unarchive it and look at the executable itself, the description, it was basically disguised as Logitech plugin installer utility. And it was actually protected with Themida and VM Protect, so the exe itself, before unpacking, was 750 megabytes, which is, in many online malware analysis services, they don't allow for that size, so attackers know that, and that's why they packed it with all this junk to hinder analysis. And once you unpack that, it's actually only 18 megabytes. So the overture of the loaders. So what it does is it starts and coordinates the malware symphony, doing things like system checks before starting, communicating with C2, ensuring the smooth entry of other malware, and timing the execution of other malware. So in this symphony, there was the PrivateLoader does a lot of the heavy-duty work here. So I call this the maestro of this symphony. So what it does is it first sends a HTTP request to C2 using the URI API tracemap.php. And if the C2 responds with a specific response, which in this case would be 15.5 pnp.10.lock, it will start the symphony. However, if there is no response, it will stop it. So after it checks for this response and see that everything is good to go, it uses a variety of online services to check the IP. These include things like api.myip.com, ipinfo.io. And for the C2 communication, it prepares a base 64 encoded encrypted string, which it sends via HTTP post to the C2 using the URI API firegate.php. So for example, this encoded encrypted string, once you decode it and decrypt it, it says get extensions USA2, which the C2 responded with empty brackets. So in this case, this was the request and response after that. This is another one. This one says add logger stats and a bunch of other stuff, IDs and things, and then it responds with success. So I developed the decode and decryption Python script, which you can find on my GitHub. So if you are ever planning to decode and decrypt the PrivateLoader traffic, there's the script, so please take a look and play around with it. So what it does next is it prepares the Ensemble, and the majority of the executables come from vk.com, and then it stores it inside the directory pictures minor policy. And by reverse engineering, it was actually like found to be randomly named, most likely using time-based randomization, and follows this regular expression pattern. So you can actually see in table 7 of the paper. So the next loader we have is the smoke loader. So this is known to inject malicious code into explorer.exe, and it was, in this specific symphony, it was seen steadily beaconing to various C2 over port 80. Additionally, it tells the Windows Defender to ignore the various directories, which includes the user's profile folder, the program's files folder. And then it also schedules a coin miner to run, and this coin miner itself is originating from the PrivateLoader, and it uses the task scheduler to run it. So you can, as you can see here, actually all these like malware are interconnected with each other, because you got PrivateLoader, which starts everything, which this smoke loader actually spawns from this PrivateLoader, and then the coin miner spawns from the PrivateLoader, but the smoke loader runs it periodically. So next we have the ensemble of the infostealers. So what it does is, in here, a variety of different infostealers are involved with a diverse range of stolen data and exfiltration techniques. So a wide range is involved because, well, from the attacker's perspective, maybe they thought by increasing the variation, it increases the success rate because some data may be unavailable, some protocols may be blocked, so they thought maybe by increasing the variation, it increases their success rate, even though it will be noisier. So we've got Lumma, first of all. So this was seen doing most of the heavy-duty info stealing here. So you can actually see it first starts off by sending a HTTP post request to the C2, which in this case, it sent act equals life, to which the C2 responded with 2 OK0. And for Lumma, the next action depends on the response, to which this C2 replied with act equals receive message, yes, and then it responds with this, you can see the details on table 9. So it was after all this C2 communication has happened, it starts performing the data exfiltration. So here you can see that it was performing a lot of the heavy-duty info stealing, such as packaging stolen data in an archive file, which includes things like screenshots, system information, browser information, and exfiltrates all of them via HTTP post. So next we have RedLine, which was seen injecting malicious code into applAunch.exe. Then it was also seen steadily beaconing to C2 over port 23929, and if you look at table 10 and 11, you can see the RedLine's config, which includes the C2 address as well as the botnet and the keys. So next we have RisePro. So this was actually seen, there were multiple instances of RisePro here. So RisePro itself uses the task scheduler to run more instances of RisePro, both at hourly and at user log on with the highest privilege. So it also uses the auto start functionality by dropping the RisePro in the startup directory. So every time that the system restarts, it's configured to run. And it was also seen connecting to C2 on port 50500. So next we have Amadey. And this was also seen to periodically run itself using the task scheduler and changes the auto-run values in the registry to a directory which contains the LNK files that point to RisePro. Again, this is another demonstration of how these malware are interconnected with one another. So in this paper, I went quite in deep for Amadey because I reverse engineered this in depth, and then I also found that Amadey, what it does is it first collects OS versions, device names, installed AVs, and then it converts this into a special 172 character token, which it sends back to the C2. To which the C2 responds with a special string enclosed in CD. And this specifies the next action. So actually, in this specific CrackedCantil malware symphony, number 1, it was actually quite quiet, likely because the C2 was blacklisted. So in order to generate a new token, you could modify the device name in the registry, which generated a new token to which the C2 responded. And in this case, it actually dropped glibteba. So again, the token generation is something that I looked into pretty in-depth. So I developed the token generation Python script as well. So this you can find on my GitHub as well. So please do look at it and play around with it. So finally, in the infostealer class, we have Stealc, which crashed here. But however, it was seen attempting to communicate to the C2 via HTTP post request, which included the device, hardware ID, as well as the build name. So to which the C2 replied with block. So likely it was blacklisted by the C2. Next, we have the chorus of the otherwares. So basically what a otherware in my definition would be anything that doesn't fall into the category of a loader, infostealer, ransomware, and typically malware that hijacks the resources of the computer. So first of all, we have the Socks5Systemz. This was seen consistently communicating to C2s via port 2023. And within the traffic, you could see a bunch of IPs with a colon and a port. Then we have the coin miners, which was, again, the one previously discussed, the one that drops from PrivateLoader to which the smoke loader runs. So finally, we have the finale of the ransomware. So basically here, the encryption activities happen last, and this ransomware acts on its own in order to prevent double encryption. Again, double encryption is not good for the ransomware because it can cause a variety of problems like making the decryption more difficult, wasting a bunch of resources, race conditions, and things like that. So as a ransomware, they want to prevent things like this. So it does many things to avoid conflicts, and it also makes the infection very obvious because you got all these ransom nodes popping up, backgrounds, pictures changing, extensions changing, a bunch of noisy things. So this is actually detrimental to the other malwares like infostealers and otherwares because for them, they want to stay on the system as long as possible, undetected, in order to milk the resources and steal as much data as possible. So that's why it uses a variety of methods to come in last, to let the other malware do its thing first. So these can include time-based methods like sleep, task scheduling, or specific triggers like system restart or waiting for C2 commands. So in this stop, it uses, again, it waits until system restart in order to do its encryption activities. So in the encryption part of the stop, it actually first sends a HTTP GET request to the C2, which it actually contains the MD5 hash of uppercase MAC address inside the URI, to which the C2 responds with a public key used for encryption, which includes the ID, and it's in PM format. And however, if the C2 does not respond, it still uses a hard-coded key, so it can still encrypt the files without being connected to the internet, or even if the C2 is dead. So again, as previously discussed, double encryption is not good for the ransomware. So things it does to prevent double encryption here would be things like appending a extension, like .haz.ljaz, as well as adding a mutex to the end of the encrypted files to signify that the file has been encrypted. So this stop that was seen here was actually pretty modular. Again, this only encrypts the files without stealing it first. So this actually gives more flexibility for the attacker and allows the attacker to pick an infostealer of their choice. So in the case of other ransomware, especially ones that use the double extortion tactic, most of them, they first steal the data and then does the encryption activities. So the attacker has more leverage over, persuading the victim to pay for the ransom. However, actually in the ransom note of stop, it does not mention anything about the data as being stolen. So what is the intent of this whole malware symphony? So as I just discussed, probably not double extortion because the ransom note doesn't warn that the data was stolen. Probably not spying as well because it's very, very noisy and it makes the infection very obvious, to which the victim would most likely take remediation actions. Probably also not to hijack resources because, again, it's very noisy, and as those malware that wants to hijack resources, you want to stay on the system as long as possible without being detected. But this whole noisiness makes it very obvious that the infection took place. So what's most likely is to maximize the damage and the profit for the attacker, basically kind of like a hit-and-run attack. So again, this might actually not be the best way in order to deliver the maximum damage. And again, there are many theories as to why things like this happen. So I myself, at this point, cannot answer exactly as to what is the intent because I'm not the composer of this symphony. We're going to have to ask whoever the heck that came up with this. So the key takeaways here would be the malware detonations were carefully coordinated, and then they work together without conflicting each other. And then we also discussed the dangers of cracked software. And finally, the importance of organizing the analysis, because as you guys just saw, the process tree was extremely complex, and this was why we had to define something clearly like the malware symphonies and coin this distinct term. Because previously it was just called dropper or loader campaign, which simply just didn't have that ring to it. Plus, it was a really generic term, which could have included any kind of multiple malware infection without coordination. So I had to, I came up with this term to distinguish between multiple malware infection that is not coordinated and a multiple malware infection that is coordinated. Another reason why I came up with this specific distinct term was to improve research and analysis as well as attribution. So if you look up something like malware symphony on Google, chances are you'll find more similar cases more easily. Again, if this was a bit difficult to follow, that's fine, because you can always rewatch it. Previously in the AnyRun blog I wrote, this focused more on the behavioral analysis side of things. So the paper discusses more on the reverse engineering and theory part of things, but this one focuses on the behavioral analysis, so please do take a look. And then, again, malware analysis is an art. And that will be the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.